Even though it doesn't feel like it yet, it's already time to start thinking about moving our houseplants indoors. But we're not going to just take our plants and stick them inside right away. What we're going to do is move them from their sunny location to a spot with a little bit more shade outside. Now what this will do is actually help them to develop some leaves in a lower light situation. So I'm just going to put one of my plants here underneath the trees, and that can help acclimate it. Now if we start this early, we'll have about a month to get our plants used to this before moving them in, and that way they won't get so much of a shock being moved indoors to that indoors environment. Well, another thing that you can do is to leach the pots out. Run water through them about twice to get the fertilizer and stuff like that out of the pots. That's a good time to do that before you move them inside. Now another thing that you'll want to do before taking them in is to look over your plants very carefully for insects, because treating for insects is much easier outdoors than it is indoors. And right here I've got a house plant that I'm going to be moving in, and I wanted to show you one of the insects that you might be finding. Now you'll want to look carefully on the leaves, just kind of a general look, but then also look underneath the leaves for insects. And that's a lot of times where they're hiding, and also where the leaf joins the stem. And you can see right here that we have an insect problem. You see this little insect right here, and also if we're looking in the leaf margin, you can see a little bit of cottony-like substance. Now this is an indication of mealybugs, and as I inspect this plant closer, you can see that we've actually got quite a few, and they do like to hide right here where the leaf joins the stem, so inspect that very closely. Now there are several things that you can do to treat for these, as well as aphids. You might find scale or spider mites. These are some of the regular pests that you might find on houseplants. Now one of the things that you can start with is just to spray them off with a very stiff stream of water. That can help. You can get the underside of the leaf as well as the top, and that's a very good thing to do outside. Sometimes that will dislodge the pest without ever having to treat at all. Also, for mealybugs, another thing that you can do is take a Q-tip and dip that in rubbing alcohol, and then just apply that to those areas where you see the mealybugs. Now you don't want to put this or spray this on the entire leaf, because it actually isn't that great for the leaf, but just applying this to the bug itself can help get rid of this. And if you do this for several days, check and make sure you've got them, you might be able to get that population down before you ever have to move it indoors. If this doesn't work for you, then you might try something like a horticultural oil or an insecticide. Again, it's easier to treat them outside than it is to treat them inside, but start with that spray of water, maybe some manual removal of the bugs. You can try the alcohol, and then go to the insecticide. That's the order that you need to do this in. And then you should have a clean plant to move indoors. Well, as I've been talking about this plant, this is actually labeled as a caper bush. Now, I had heard about capers in cooking and things, but never really realized what they were. And capers, you can see here, many times you'll find them in the grocery store, and they're along with olives and used a lot in Mediterranean foods. And as you look at them, it's still a little hard to tell what they are. But actually what a caper is the actual flower bud before it opens of the caper bush. These are picked and then pickled, and that's what capers are. Now this is a caper bush, and they're not hardy here in Oklahoma, so it's something that we're going to have to move indoors and have a lot of light for. But we're going to try and grow this, and maybe we'll get some capers off of it. Now it likes a very well-drained soil, and again it likes warm temperatures, and we've actually got quite a bit of perlite in our soil mix here, just so it gets a lot of good drainage. So over the winter we're going to keep this really on the dry side. It's a plant that is from the Mediterranean region. It likes an environment very similar to an olive tree, so it's kind of that hot, dry environment. So we're going to try and grow this and see if we can get some capers indoors. Well, speaking of other plants that may be a little bit more unusual to put indoors, one of the final plants that might be fun to try inside are some of the dwarf cannas. Now here, this is striped beauty. It's a dwarf canna, and it has the variegated foliage, and it's been very nice for us this summer in the pot. Well, what we're going to do is move this indoors to a very brightly lit location. If you don't have any bright light, it probably won't work to move a canna indoors. However, if you do have a bright light situation, this might be fun to do. Now, it's probably not going to bloom for you inside. However, if you have a canna with the variegated foliage, it should look very nice. Now, we've got a little bit of burn on our leaf margins, and if you move this inside and the leaves start looking kind of ratty, you can actually cut it off at about 4 inches above the bottom here, and then it should regrow new leaves for you. You'll want to keep it again in a bright spot and a little bit on the drier side than you would outside, so that you don't rot the rhizome, and see what your canna does for you as a house plant. So basically, it's time to start thinking about moving those plants in, not necessarily bringing them in yet, but starting the process.